morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Hope you're having good time with your family and friends and liking these sessions. In today's session on Azure, I'm here to discuss what Microsoft Fabric is and how you can utilize Copilot within Fabric. We are going to discuss some of the terminologies that I associate with Fabric and also how you're going to make billing sense when you are trying to utilize Copilot within different services of Fabric. So, first of all, let's start with what is this service? So Microsoft Fabric is a end-to-end data analytics solution for you. Now, if you think of in an organization, if you are a one-stop shop, and let's say if you're the only user who are or who is managing your data end-to-end, you might have to deal with separate components, whether it's extraction, transformation, loading, or even making dashboards and integrating within your application. Or maybe you're a large shop in which you have different users who are managing different data at different stages. For example, you can be a data engineer, data scientist, you can be part of machine learning team, or you can be a Power BI user. Now, typically, when it comes to this kind of scenario, you have to deal with different products, different vendors. With Microsoft Fabric, this is Microsoft opportunity to bring everything or different components under one umbrella. If I have to use the analogy, if you look at Microsoft Office consists of different services. It has Microsoft Word, which is for document authoring. It has Excel for spreadsheet. It has PowerPoint for presentation. Similarly, Fabric consists of 7 core services. It has Data Factory for integration, data engineering for ETL. It has data science for modeling, Power BI for visualization, and data warehouse for storage. And recently, it has also combined 2 services under real time intelligence, which used to be real time analytics and data activator, which is typically used for streaming data in real time and you can ingest it. And the central repository where you're going to store this entire data, regardless of which core service you're utilizing, is OneLake, which is built on ADLS or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. This prevents duplication of data and also keep the management much more easier for you. So this is what Microsoft Fabric is in a nutshell. Also look at some of the terminology that will come across when you're dealing or deploying these services, starting with the Fabric tenant. Now, this is the top level in the hierarchy. A Fabric tenant is dedicated for your organization where you're going to create, store, and manage Fabric item. It is aligned with the Entra ID, which is the default identity services if you're utilizing Microsoft Cloud. So I'll put this as top level in the hierarchy. After that comes the capacity, which is measured in capacity unit and is nothing but the compute engine. Now, based on various activities, it's going to get its performance on the capacity unit that you're going to go and deploy. Now, you can have one or more capacity in your tenant. Then you have the domain, which is logical grouping of workspaces. Now, as an organization, you might be having different departments like you have sales, you have IT, marketing. With domain, you can group these different workspaces, and based on the job requirement, you can give access to those folks accordingly. And then you have the workspaces, which is a collaborative container. Under a sales domain, maybe you can have workspace 1, workspace 2, similarly in IT or marketing too. And based on the job description, you can give them access as admin, member, contributor, or just viewer. And then finally, you have the fabric item. Now, these are the building blocks of your fabric platform. Now, these are the objects that you're going to create and manage in Fabric. For example, you can go and manage data warehouse. You can create data pipelines, semantic model, create dashboard. But these are all different Fabric item that we are talking about, right? So these are some of the terminology that you're going to come across when you're utilizing and deploying Microsoft Fabric in your environment. All right, so let's look at now Copilot within Microsoft Fabric experience. So as I mentioned that Fabric consists of different services, 7 core services. Now the interaction or the experience or the capabilities between all these different core services will be different. Now I'm not going to talk about how that experience is going to be when it comes to utilizing, because based on if you're utilizing, let's say, within real-time intelligence or within data engineering or Power BI, that experience might be a different. But whatever result you're going to get as part of this Copilot utilization within Fabric, you got to do due diligence on your side to make sure that it is as per the organization requirement. But as you know, Copilot is based on large language model, and in the back end, it is using Azure OpenAI. Now, in order you want to utilize this service within Fabric, there are certain prereq. Now, you need to have F64 above in the capacity license, or in Power BI capacity P1 or above. Now, this is the prerequisite if you're utilizing, say, F16 or F4 or anything less than F64, that option won't be available for you. Now, if you're in US or France tenant, this is enabled by default for you. But if you fall under tenant, if your tenant falls anything outside of this region, you got to go and enable this manually. But my suggestion here is that you want to restrict access to people who wants to use Copilot within Fabric, so you can make utilize of security group, because there is also a cost implication to that too. And if you don't keep a track, you can exhaust your capacity unit pretty quickly. So I will show you actually on the portal how that's going to look like. But the prereq is that you need to have F64 or P1 SQs at least to utilize this service, right? Now, other thing that I want to point out over here is that there are, based on the steps which are typically you associate with any large language model. It's based on generative AI, obviously. So there are 3 steps involved when you're going to utilize within within Fabric. The first one going to be the input, which is based on the number of tokens. And step number 2 is your grounding of data. And step 3 going to be the output that is also calculated in tokens. And I'll explain what tokens means in a moment. But when you're utilizing Copilot within Fabric, it's still based on the six pillars of responsible AI. What does that mean? Microsoft is not going to utilize your data to train its Copilot model. And secondly, when the prompts are given to Copilot within Fabric capacity, it is not going to store any of these prompts. So you can be rest assured that your data is your data. It resides within the organization or within your tenant, and Microsoft is not going to utilize that data to train its model. But again, F64 is the minimum. And in case you're also utilizing, let's say, a trial F64 capacity, you won't be able to utilize because it's only available in case it is purchased through regular means. So F64 capacity unit or Power BI P1 capacity, these are the prerequisite for you. Now, when it comes to costing this, right? So you can look at this. This is what I'm pointing out, that there are two components to this, and this is comparable to in capacity unit seconds. So let's say if I give a input or if I give a prompt, let's say for example, give me sales target for user X. This is the prompt that I've given. Let me change color. And if the number of tokens as part of this input is going to be, let's say for example, 10 tokens, and I get a response, so grounding will be done, and then I get a response, and the number of tokens that response constitutes is, let's say, 50 tokens. And as I showed you, the costing is for 1,000 tokens is equivalent to 200 capacity unit seconds, right? So let's say, let's do some maths here. So for 1,000 tokens is 200 capacity unit seconds. Now for 10 tokens, how much it is going to be, right? I think it's going to be 2 seconds. And for the output, for 1,000 token is 600 capacity unit seconds. In our case, in our example, we have 50 tokens. How much is going to be? It's going to be 30 seconds. So total is equal to 32 seconds, right? This is important number. Now, let's see, actually, let me go to the Azure pricing calculator. And let's take example of F64 capacity. How much is the cost? I'm going to take East US and let's pick because this is a minimum requirement. So F64 730, actually, let me change this to 1 hour just to do the calculation easier. So F64 1 hour is $11.52 US. So for 1 hour, we're talking about $11.52. Just remember that in our case, we are talking about 32 seconds, right? So let's convert this 1 hour into seconds, which is 3,600 seconds, 1152. And if I'm talking about 32 seconds here, how much is going to be? So let's me do the calculation. It is going to be close to, I think, 0.10. So close to 10 cents. That is how much capacity unit will be charged if I'm running that Copilot service with input and output for 32 seconds. So this is just an example just to make sense of the pricing. And when you're trying to, because just remember, when you're creating pipelines, when you're creating any of these activities, right, modeling, semantic modeling and all that kind of stuff, it is utilizing that from capacity unit. And when you're utilizing Copilot within Fabric, it is not different. But the only thing is that because these Copilot transactions, they are calculated in tokens, and that this is the consumption rate going to be. So per 1,000 token, we are talking about 200 capacity unit seconds for input, and for output completion and the response that you're going to get. Let's say, for example, if I ask them, okay, create a dashboard for me, or create any query, basically, create a code for me. So per 1,000 token, in form of output, is going to be 600 cubic unit seconds. And based on whatever, in this example, I've taken F64 example, right? So it ran for 32 seconds in an example. The cost is going to be 0.102 on an average for you. So this is how you're going to calculate. But let me also show you actually on the Fabric portal, where you're going to go and enable this service. So I'm on app.fabric.microsoft.com, right? From the left bottom corner, you can go and see all these services. I'm on the data factory page, and I have workspaces, right? So if you look at my workspace, I have two, my workspace and ITS workspace. If I go and expand this workspace, I can go into the workspace settings, and you can see that I'm utilizing a trial version under the licensing information, right? So this is a trial version. So that means that I cannot go enable Copilot, because as I mentioned, it's not available for trial. You got to have F64 and above, or P1 capacity, in order to utilize this. Now I can go and expand this gear button here. And if I go under the admin portal, I have the 10 settings. Now user can create Fabric items. If I go and expand that, I can also, let's say, go and search for Copilot here, and depending upon your tenant region, it will be enabled or disabled by default for you. But as I mentioned, that you should always give access to only folks who can utilize the service. So you can go and enable this for the entire organization, which is a default, but you can also restrict it by giving access to only specific security group that, as an administrator, you have a complete control over, right? And you can also manage the metrics and everything. And actually, talking about the metrics, let me go and because I have the Fabric Capacity Metrics app. And if you remember, in my last video, I showed you how you can go and access this application, because there is going to be a separate line item for Copilot in Fabric, where you can go and keep a track of how or where you're getting that consumption for. Because remember that it's going to take, actually, there are two cost components. One is the compute, and other is the storage, which is the one lake. But this is going to fall under the compute, because it's taking out that computation from the capacity unit that you're going to go and deploy. and it's going to be under the capacity unit button. So make sure that your capacity name is highlighted. Now in my case it's a trial version, but this you can go and keep a track of it. Let me also show you just a brief. I think I've taken a screenshot. So this is the one that you can. I don't think so. It's too maybe visible that much, but this is an example of where you can keep a track of and see where that consumption is coming from. But this is how you're going to see and keep a track of, and some of the components and terminology that you typically associate with Fabric capacity. Hopefully, this was helpful. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.